Mute.
Here we go. All right. Well, good morning. Good morning, everyone. We were waiting for the treasure known as John Richardson to show up. Our national treasure, our international treasure known as John Richardson, his keen analytical mind. Good morning. My name is Anthony Parent. I am host of the IRS Medic podcast. And today we are going to be discussing what is really residency-based taxation, what is really citizenship-based taxation. A lot of people get these wrong, and because they get it wrong, they don't know what the solution is. And so really today we're going to be going over John created a fantastic presentation, and these are the presentations that everyone hangs on for, and it's really helping us grow our audience to a whole bunch of new tax professionals and just curious individuals as well. It's wonderful we have here going. Joining us as well is, I'm going to just say this, the great Keith Redmond. Keith is the one who's really brought us all together. His group, American Overseas, American Expatriates on Facebook. You can join there. He's joining us. Good morning, Keith. How are you doing today?
I'm good. I'm great, but I'm not an international treasure. So
You're not an
fine.
international. Yeah. Keith and I were chit chatting a little bit before the international treasure John Richardson showed up, and Keith was just mentioning today to me. He's like, "Yeah, I have 3 phone calls tomorrow with a few people who had some questions for me." And I just sort of commented. I'm like, he was telling me, he's like, "Oh yeah, I have someone here, around the globe." I was just sort of thinking about myself, and I said, "What a wonderful segue to this is like how globally destructive the U.S. tax system is because of its citizenship-based taxation is truly a
Yes,
global catastrophe, right, Keith?"
it is. It is. I talk to people literally around the world who are some are in dire straits. Some just need to explore their options and formulate a strategy, whatever that strategy may be. But it is literally, I talk to people around the world.
It is a disaster. And so, and help us figure this out is the international treasure, John Richardson. John, good morning to you. So great to have you. By the way, and just something to mention that you can follow, you can, I think I spelled that right. You can follow John on Twitter at Expatriation Law. As well. So you can really join the discussion there. A lot of great ideas, a great community we're getting going on X as it is. So John, good morning to you. I can get your presentation up here. I went through it. It's impressive, incredible. So here we go. We need to discuss what really is residency-based taxation and what is the alternative under which we're suffering. Next slide. Here we go, John. So start us off here. What's this about?
Okay, this is, so why are we doing this at all? Okay, because there's obviously a lot of pain and a lot of problems being generated by the U.S. extraterritorial, whatever you want to call it, citizenship-based tax regime. However, there is not much agreement on what needs to change here. People say in sort of a vague way, well, we got to get rid of citizenship taxation, or we got to move to residence-based taxation. And it's pretty clear to me that the vast majority of people who talk about this actually are not promoting a move to residence-based taxation at all.
Yeah,
Exactly. What they're doing is, promoting something or other that, is a solution for some guy someday, some part of its life. And, the bottom line is this, that the U.S. extraterritorial tax regime, aka citizenship taxation, is a cancerous tumor, and it needs to be completely removed. Not, let's just sort of treat it and keep the tumor in there. So this particular presentation was really a response to a lot of, I think, public disagreement online about what the objectives of the various opponents of the U.S. tax system, be they individuals, groups, what have you. So this is an attempt to try to bring people together, at least in terms of understanding what the issue is. So in that spirit, okay, I begin, but also in that spirit, I want to start with a conclusion today before we get into this. Okay, the bottom line is this, and I think it's reflected on this very, very first slide. When you look at a country's tax system, you look first at who are the people who are subject, or in the case of the United States, subjects, okay, to that tax system. That focuses on the who. Who are the people targeted by it? Pause. And that's a very separate question from how are they targeted, what kind of income is taxed, et cetera, okay? Now, because the problem with the US system is really who is being targeted, that is people who live in other countries with no connection to the United States, okay? The solution to this is not to change how are they taxed, but rather to change the fact that they're taxed at all.
Thank you, John. John, if I could just, I just want to interrupt with one point, and this is the part that frustrates me beyond, as someone who does international taxation, tax returns, figuring complicated issues out. The last thing we friggin' need, the last thing we need is another exception. When you put an exception in, guess what? You are actually complicating an already complicated matter, because you have to go through the whole analysis to determine if an exception applies. It actually, and then one year, it may be this exception applies this year. And oh, you know what? I don't have to worry about that. I don't have to worry about that because an exception applies. But maybe one fact changed, and now, oh no, you are subject to it. So the last thing we need is another carve out that says, oh, we'll have a same country exception for FATCA. And I'm sure we'll get into this later. That is my point. That's the last thing we need. We can simplify this a lot easier and a lot better. Adding carve outs does nothing to alleviate the problem. So thank you.
And again, and
yeah,
last,
go ahead, Keith.
One quick sentence. And adding carve outs and making exceptions, and those who support it, means that they are actually supporting the current tax regime of citizenship-based taxation. Full stop.
Right. Exactly. Thanks.
Yeah, I mean, I think that both of you make very important and absolutely accurate points. But the key again is this: is that the solution to this problem is targeting who is subject to the U.S. tax system. If we get that solved, meaning that people just because of U.S. citizenship are not subject to the U.S. tax system, or as we describe it, if citizenship is completely severed from tax residency, that's how the problem is solved. The problem is not solved by keeping U.S. citizens because of citizens subjects of the United States.
Exactly. Subject, yeah.
Well, you're going to remain a subject, but, we think we'll just tax you a little less punitively, or we're going to increase the foreign earned income exclusion or something like that. So the bottom line is this: what residence-based taxation means in this context, and this is completely 100% aligned with what residence-based taxation is understood to be in the rest of the world, is that the relevant criterion for determining tax residency is residency, meaning some kind of physical, economic, domicile, what have you, connection with a country, and not based on status, like where you were born or immigration status, or I mean, what's the difference between place of birth and blue eyes, right? Why not just exempt people with blue eyes, or people who were born Thursdays, or something like that?
Yeah.
The U.S. defines tax residency, sure, if you live there, okay, the way the rest of the world does, but it's a status based type of system. If you're a green card holder, if you're a citizen, we're claiming you regardless of where you live in the world. So the right way to attack this, and what residency-based taxation means, is that we don't look to a person's status to determine whether they're subject to a tax system, but rather we look to the connection, the residential connection to the country, what have you. And yes, there is a spectrum of definitions for what residence might mean, but in no case is it based on simply place of birth? Okay, etc.
Right.
So that's the bottom line. Now, I just want to make one other point before we start. All countries without exception, will tax income sourced in the country. So we're not talking about that at all, right? Obviously, if income is sourced in the United States taxes it regardless of who earns it or receives it.
Right. Right.
If a person is definitely resident, well, of course we'll tax them if they're resident.
Right.
They're going to tax. What we're talking about is what citizenship taxation really is. And what citizenship taxation, aka the extraterritorial tax regime, really is, are you ready? Is the United States claim that it can impose the totality of the Internal Revenue Code, taxes, forms, and penalties on people with no residential connection to the United States who live in other countries on when it's not even U.S. source income. So that's what it means. And by the way,
Exactly.
that is the only practical, functional definition of what citizenship taxation really is. It's not about patriotism. It's about reaching into other countries and saying, you know what? You may think those are your tax residents, but really they're our tax residents.
They're ours and we own them. And you know what? If they try to escape it, we're going to punish them.
So
yeah, exactly.
That's by way of introduction. So here we go.
Fantastic. All right. So by the way, if you are, I do see people popping in live and joining you. Thank you so much for joining us today. If you, we're going to be going through John's slides, and he has a bunch of links and resources. And so if you want, I did just create a link to it. And if you go to YouTube, I know a lot of people are watching it live on X. But if you go to YouTube here to our IRSmatic channel, you can find the video there. And if in the description, I put a link to these exact slides because there's a whole bunch of links that John has, resources, so you can follow along yourself. Okay, so just go there. All right, John. So here we go.
Beginning, and this is really something out of Keith's whatever the group's called, the American Expatriates Group, where he, in frustration, puts up a post saying all Americans overseas need to fully support real residency-based. Only 3 do, leaving aside how many do. The point is that a clear and overwhelming majority of people who oppose the citizenship taxation, they don't want to move to residency-based taxation. They say they do, but they don't, because what they really want to do is they just want to improve the conditions of citizens. They just want to make it.
I know, right? Just a few more carve-outs and exceptions. That's all we need, and the problems will be solved.
Yeah, and if I may add that these groups that really don't want to move to residency-based taxation, just take a look at their actions. They won't even bring it up when they go on Capitol Hill. They just will not do it.
Yeah. By the way, and I guess this would be a good time to tease our broadcast on Friday. On Friday, we're going to be discussing Republicans overseas proposal, which is pretty beefy because it is a proposal to residency-based taxation. So we're going to be covering that one. And we'll be covering that on Friday. So be sure to subscribe and so you get alerts to that. So let's get going back to our slides, John.
Okay. So yeah, Republicans overseas has a proposal to sever citizenship from tax residency. But here's the thing, right? And what people need to understand is, I've been having this conversation with people. I can hardly believe this conversation is still going on after all these years. Somebody says, well, this group supports residence-based. Look, it's on their website. They say they support residence-based taxation.
Yeah.
No, they don't. What they support is an improvement to citizenship taxation because they are not willing to commit to the magic cluster of words or their equivalent. Their goal is not to sever citizenship from tax residency. Rather, it's let's get another carve out of this, that, and the other thing. But continuing on.
Yeah, I mean, essentially, they'll say anything, right? They're just going to say anything to keep the ruse going. All right, so.
All right, now, the problem here is, right, you don't confuse the who is subject to tax with how are they taxed. Most of the advocacy in this area is really focusing on the what, how people are taxed. We don't want them taxed in this way. We want to, in the extreme cases, we want to make sure that Americans abroad are not taxed on non-U.S. source income, et cetera. But, that's focusing on how people are taxed. and the goal needs to be on the who. They're not subject to the tax at all. Okay. So again, the bottom line, what residency-based taxation means, and somebody will say, well, John, that's just your definition. We don't agree. Okay, fair enough. But I would say that my definition is aligned with the definition of residency-based taxation in the whole wide world, with the exception of one country, Eritrea. Okay. And by the way,
and that's just, yeah, I don't even, come on. Yeah.
to compare Eritrea to the United States is a gross insult to the nation of Eritrea.
That's true.
Because the U.S.
That is
system
true.
is so much more punitive. But moving along.
Moving along here. Hopefully, it looks like I froze up here. Oh, our internet is not so lovely today.
Now, I want to keep hammering at this point because this is where, yeah, you can go to the next one, right?
Yeah, John, I'm sorry about that. My internet is not going so well today. I believe it's on my end here. Let's see here. Hopefully it works.
Up further towards the beginning.
Yeah, John, I'm sorry. Hold on a second. I think my computer crashed again. Hang on. I'll be right back, guys.
Okay.
All right, here. Yeah.
Yeah, I think this is good because everybody needs to be on the same page of understanding on what real residency-based taxation is and how it's practiced by every other country.
The bottom line is this, that these people can say what they want.
Sure.
Okay. But it is very, very clear to me that at the present time, only seating Republicans overseas are defining the issue in this way.
And have formally come out and supported this, correct? Yes.
It's pretty clear, okay, that these other groups are not. But hopefully they will. Hopefully they will.
Yeah, and I think it'll be important for these other groups to read through the proposal that Republicans overseas has set out. Number one, and number two, to make a statement. Do you support severing U.S. citizenship from tax residency?
I think they have to make that statement. That has to be the goal. Otherwise, otherwise they're probably making the situation worse.
Yeah. Do you support it, and will you advocate for it?
Well, that's exactly right. I mean, they're two different issues, and I think that probably most of them could be persuaded to support it, but advocating, I don't think they will. Okay, continue.
Yeah. Yep. Sorry about that, guys. Here we go.
Right.
Thank you for continuing the show.
Next slide.
All right. And here we go.
Okay. Now, again, because this is so important, and this may be overkill, but I'm not so sure it is. Okay. I want to run you through a couple of hypotheticals here, and then we'll move faster. But this point I need to drill down on this. So I'm going to give you 4 questions, and let's run through these. Question: if you live in Canada, do you care whether Australian residents are taxed on capital gains from selling Australian real estate? If you live, no, because you're not subject to their tax system, right?
Yeah.
If you live in Canada, do you care whether Germany taxes the non-German income earned by German residents? No, because you're not subject to it, right? If you live in Canada, do you care the UK is abolishing its non-dom regime? No, because you don't live in the UK, right? You live in Canada. And the last one, maybe not as clear. If you live in Canada, do you care that U.S. citizens are subject to taxation on their worldwide income if they reside outside the United States? Mostly no, unless you happen to be a U.S. citizen, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Focusing on the who. Agreed? Now, next slide. To distinguish this from the what. If you're a tax resident of Canada, do you care whether Canada taxes the gain on the sale? You sure do.
Yep.
Why? Because that's where you live.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you care whether Canada tax income source outside of Canada? Yep, you sure do.
Yep.
You live in Canada. You're a tax resident of the UK. Do you care whether it's abolishing its non-dom regime? Probably. Well, maybe. Okay, because you live in the UK, right? And you're subject to their tax system. You're a tax resident of Estonia. Do you care where Estonia has a worldwide? Sure you do, because that's where you live. Agreed. So again, this may seem like overkill, but my experience is it's not. You need to separate the who is subject to the tax system from the what, how are they taxed. Next.
And I just want to, here's a comment right here. What is the benefit for them to not support residency-based taxation?
We'll get there.
All right. Thank you. All right. Beautiful. All right. Next slide. Here we go.
Okay. So again, you can skip that slide. I think I've beaten that.
Yep. Great.
Okay. Now, on the who is a tax resident, I mean, different countries have different rules. Obviously, they're not identical. But what they do have in common is they define some kind of connection, a fact-based connection to the country. Okay? Not, oh, look, you have blue eyes, so we'll claim you. Okay, next. Now, I made up this phrase, 50 Shades of Tax Residency. It sounds like a great movie, doesn't it?
Oh, it sounds exciting.
Okay, yeah, I think you could make a great, exciting 50 Shades of Tax Residency. Again, I'm making the point again. Now, let me just give you some examples here, okay? So I'll use Canada because it's pretty vanilla, and it's also one I happen to know rather well, okay? But so some countries will just have a statutory test, right? Or not all, say, if you stay more than 183 days in a country, we don't care what your connection is beyond that. It's just a physical presence test. And the U.S. has something called a substantial presence test, and a lot of countries have something like that, where if you have a physical presence in a country beyond a certain number of days, then you're a tax resident. Period. But most other countries also have something that's equivalent to a fact-based determination of, like, do you really live there even if you don't spend 183 days there, sort of thing, right? And Canada calls it ordinary residence. And, it's the type of stuff you might expect. Like, if you got a family, a wife and kids living in Toronto and you're claiming you're not living in Toronto, well, you're going to have a hard time making that up. You might win, okay?
Yeah.
But that's a tough hill to climb, right?
Yeah.
Et cetera, right? So most countries have sort of a hybrid. Let's look at the, what's really happening in your life.
So something actually relevant to your life. I mean, actually some sort of, right. You actually are living there. It's some, and I think, one of the test for an apartment is often, well, do you have a stove, right? Okay, now we're going to call it an apartment because it's hard to claim it's not a separate apartment, in your house if you have a stove there, right? That's sort of things like, well, you might be able to win, but it's generally related to something actual in your life.
Yeah. To put another way, the way the world normally operates in trying to decide if you're a tax resident is, well, they look at the circumstances of your life and not the circumstances of your birth. Right?
Yeah, exactly.
Now, the United States is actually the opposite.
Yeah.
We look at the circumstances of your birth because that's usually how citizenship is conferred.
Yeah.
Rather than the circumstances of your life.
Isn't that interesting?
That probably sums up part 2 anyway. Let's see what else there is.
All right. By the way, if you are joining us live and you are watching on Twitter, you can go to, you'll see all these links that John has. Once again, let me just show you. We just go to the YouTube channel and you can go to the description there and it will be right in there. Just go to you go to find IRS Medic on YouTube and you'll see it right in there. So again, here it is. Just go here if you're looking for the links to the slides. All right, let's go on. Next slide.
Great stuff in this presentation for people who want to learn more. But anyway,
absolutely, yeah.
So I'll say it again. Okay, keep driving home the point. Sorry about this.
We gotta
understand. I already went through that. I mean, so some countries have a deeming, you were here this long, other, or they look at ordinarily resident. We've talked about, I just went over that slide.
All right.
Continuing on. Again, I've gone over that, right? Circumstance of birth versus circumstance of life. Continuing on.
All right. And here we go. Part 3.
Now, I think it's important for people to understand, and really, I think I'm directing these comments more to somebody who might just happen on this video and wondering what in God's name we're even talking about.
Oh, the poor thing. The poor thing.
But I mean, Americans abroad understand this, but I think it's important to reinforce what citizenship taxation really is. Now, again, before we go through this, I want to make a clear statement. What citizenship taxation really is the United States claiming the right to tax people who do not live in the United States, who live in other countries, on income that is non-U.S. source income. That's what it is.
That's what it is.
Okay. I mean, it's not, that's what it is practically. That's how it operates. It's not some kind of, well, U.S. citizenship is about taxation, so you need to pay tax, right? It's not some abstract concept. What it is reaching into other countries, claiming the residents of those other countries as real as U.S. tax residents, and imposing taxes, form, and penalties on them, right?
Well, John, and this would be a point for this, is that that the U.S. claims you're a tax resident, even if you don't live in the U.S. That's American exceptionalism right there, right? There we go. We're going to claim you're a tax resident, even though you don't live in the U.S. That's how absurd this is.
Or have never lived in the U.S.
And you're right. Yeah, Keith, you're right. Yeah, you might have never been in the U.S. You could have been, right, exactly. So it's a little much, right? All right. So, John, moving on.
Move on.
Okay.
Now, what I've done here is I put together 5 slides, to really reinforce what this bullshit is, in terms of how it really works, and not the way academics and tax.
Yeah, those academics. Yeah.
All right. Now, I just want to highlight these things, and if anybody's interested, as you might expect, I've written a lot about this over the years, right? But the first point is the claiming residents of other countries is really U.S. tax residents. Okay. Actually, the titles of the slides, I think, probably tell us all we need.
Right. And you could be, right. And the U.S. says, well, you could be residents of 2 countries, tax residents of 2 countries at the same time. Sure. That's not a problem for us.
Well, or Anthony, I think we've talked about this before, right? Any U.S. citizen who is also a tax resident of another country is automatically a dual tax resident because of the U.S. rules, right?
Isn't that something, right? Yeah, we don't stop and think about that, right? Most people don't. How is that possible? Well, the magic of the U.S. empire. There we go.
The second thing that's absolutely key to understand this is that not only does the U.S. reach in and claim these people, this is our property, but they say, we're going to impose more punitive rules on you.
Right.
Than we do on the people who really live in the United States. Now, they would deny this, of course.
Right. When we've talked about this before, and we have the links right here, so you can go in those yourselves. Yes. Well established. This is undisputable fact. The U.S. absolutely burdens those overseas much more harshly all over the place. You cannot dispute it. There's the links right there if you want to go check it out yourself. We're not going to get it.
Let's keep moving.
We're going to keep moving here. Okay. Yeah. So here we go. Right.
They're always subject to unintended consequences. I mean, look at this shit. Guilty PFIC, foreign trust. Look at this stuff. Married filing separately abuse. I mean, do you know that since 2017, you file married filing separately, you're required to file a return with as little as $5 of income. Next. It's an invisible fence. The ad you see on YouTube for an invisible dog fence, to keep your dog in your yard. I mean, I hate to say it, but, for those who believe, Americans who believe that somehow they're free, take a look at the invisible dog fence ad or read Clavel's King Rat, which is about an open prison, in the Second World War. But anyway.
Well, and I would say this, John, this is, I think, something very, very critical to understand about it, because I think your analogy is pretty good about the electric fence, because if you try to escape, you will likely get zapped. Because that's the entire point. And you get zapped because they went, the Clinton administration, there's been changes to the exit tax, and specifically Specifically, the changes were, you know what, people are leaving the U.S. tax system because it's so abusive. So you know what we're going to do? We're going to make the exit tax more abusive so they don't leave. So that's actually what happened. And it's why it's right out in the open. It's right in the open. We want to make sure that you can't leave because of our abusive taxation. So we'll just abuse you more. That's what it is. And that is.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Okay, next. All right. Now, this is something that, for example, we had that interesting discussion with Michael, for example, a couple of days ago. And this is something I find very interesting, is that most Americans don't understand that this is not some private issue between them and the U.S. government. This is an interference with the tax sovereignty of other countries.
Yes.
Okay, there's no question about it. And arguably, you get these groups saying, well, we're Americans, we're going to campaign for the Democrats in our country, when what they're really doing is campaigning for laws that will impose taxation on residents of that country, right? I think down the road there may be an argument for deportation, okay, et cetera. I mean, this is so offensive. The U.S. tax system is so offensive to the sovereignty of other countries, and I predict we will get there eventually. Next. And then of course we have FATCA. Where basically, for some, well, I mean, I know the reason, but, the absolute ludicrousness of these countries at their own expense actually going to identify people who the U.S. in its sole discretion, they're free to define anybody as a U.S. citizen. I mean, this is unbelievable stuff, right? But this is why you get these letters. If it's a corporation, tell me who the major shareholder is, or list all your tax residency. These are FATCA letters. Okay, next.
FATCA letters. Oh boy, yeah, right. Those are.
And of course, once identified, I mean, minimally, it's going to be a lot of trauma for you. Okay, but whatever. Next. Okay. Now we're almost back, okay, to where we started. So what is real or really residence-based taxation, what have you? I've already gone over this, right? Really, and here are links to a couple of things written a few years ago. One of them I wrote, another one Karen Alpert wrote, making the point, again, that residency-based taxation focuses on who's subject to tax, not somehow saying, well, you're still subject to the tax system, okay, but we're just going to make it easier for you, etc. Anyway, so next. Well, I set it upside down, sideways, and diagonally. Next.
Yeah, some actual connection.
Now, here's what it does not mean.
Yes.
Now, this I think is what's really important here, and you look at things like the holding bill in 2018 or Congressman Byers' bill. Now, listen, to be clear, these are good people doing the best they can with the understanding that they have. Okay. But, all right, I think it's very, very important to understand what this stuff really is. Residence-based taxation does not mean that U.S. citizens, because of their citizenship, are still subject to the Internal Revenue Code. That's not what it means.
Right.
It means they're no longer subject to the Internal Revenue Code. But I mean, if you look at things like the holding bill or the buyer thing, right? Increasing the foreign earned income exclusion is retaining citizenship taxation.
And
it's focusing on the what component, what you're taxed on, not whether you're taxed. And I would point out that even if you were to exclude all foreign earned income from the foreign earned income exclusion, it doesn't get you out of all these forms and the penalties.
It does not. No, it does not. Absolutely does not.
The bottom line is that people, groups, everybody needs to come together for the only goal that matters long run: severing citizenship from tax residency. Next.
Yeah, when John, I just want to, on the foreign earned income exclusion, that's actually a huge problem for any meaningful reform, because so many people overseas. What's the beef? And like our guest on Monday, Michael, it's like, well, hey, look, I'm getting paid by a U.S. company living in Argentina. The foreign earned income exclusion is taking care of a good deal of it. And so what's the big beef? But it only applies to certain types of income. And God forbid you work for yourself overseas. God forbid you are a U.S. person who actually works for yourself. Now you are stepping really into an incredibly awful, awful, awful system that homeland Americans aren't subject to. They're not subject to, but you are.
Yeah, well, everybody sees the world through how this affects them, and he's an interesting guy, but I mean, it's not a problem for me, so it's not a problem, right? But anyway, moving
and
on.
I think that's what we need to unite around, and we all need to see it's a problem because that's the thing. Your circumstances in life may change, and so the thing that you don't care about, and this is probably my biggest frustration when people would go off like, oh, it's not that big of a deal. And this is what I found is that at some point in your life, the IRS, you will have an IRS problem. You will have it, and you're going to be surprised how awful it is. You're going to be utterly surprised how awful and expensive and time consuming it is, because you can really go a long time, but maybe something happens. You inherit a house and there's an issue with it. And now, oh boy.
Sell a house.
Yeah.
I mean, that's exactly right. Again, so the only thing that solves this for all people, all the time, under all circumstances, is to make it so that just the fact of being a U.S. citizen doesn't mean you're subject to the U.S. tax stuff anymore, right? In other words, citizenship has to be separate from tax residence. But look, so you get all these people, and this is human nature. Well, if I can solve my problem, the problem is solved, right? But if they are proposing anything that leaves U.S. citizens, because of citizenship as U.S. tax residents, they are not advocating for residency-based taxation. I think it's even worse. They're effectively accepting citizenship taxation and just asking that conditions be improved.
Yeah.
Next. Well, I made this point to date. Well, other than the Republicans overseas proposal, the recent, which is new. Well, it's not. I mean, it's new in terms of being discussed openly. I guess I would put it that way. But whatever. I mean, you look at the holding bill, the buyer bill, right? I mean, what these do fundamentally is they fiddle with the foreign earned income exclusion. And once again, I will say it, that retains citizenship taxation. Plain and simple. That's it. Okay? Moving on. Now, I've been at this for a very long time. I don't know why. Okay, but I have been at this a very long time. And what I've come to see is that the impediment to change is not, the U.S. government is somewhat of an impediment to change, but the main impediment to change are individual Americans abroad and their organizations. And the reason is that they are unwilling to unite against this principle, in favor of this principle. But let's go through this a little bit, the primary obstacles, okay? That's a Keith Redmond tweet, I think. Okay.
Yeah, Keith, would you like to speak to this a little bit on this, on your sort of your frustrations with this? Nope, I guess not. Keith, are you there? Oh,
I do. I was on mute.
Okay.
Yeah, I just have to. I can't read the tweet. It's so small here. Let me see. Here we go. Americans overseas or their organizations cannot even come together. They can't even come together on the definition of real residency-based taxation that the rest of the world practices. I mean, that's a fundamental problem right there. They either can't come together on the definition of residency-based taxation, number one, or number two, they say they are for residency-based taxation, but they're not. And number three is even if they say they're for residency-based taxation, when they go to Capitol Hill and do their Overseas Americans Week or something, they will not even bring it up. They will not bring it up to talk about it or ask for it. They will not do that. That's a major frustration.
And something I didn't understand this at the time, but now thanks to you guys, my understanding has increased. And, one thing I didn't realize was that most Americans abroad are Democrats. I didn't know that. And what happens
for the most
is,
part, yeah,
and that really surprises me.
Yeah.
And then for the most part is that as individual people, they recognize this isn't good for them, but the marching orders from the national US based Democrats are like, no, shut up, vote for us, shut up and vote for us, because otherwise, look, the world's going to fall apart if you don't.
Right. And the thing is this is one proposal that Republicans overseas have put on the table. This is one policy change that they are proposing. And it doesn't mean that you have to be in agreement with Republicans or like their ideology, but you can still support this proposal or policy. It's not mutually exclusive. You see what I mean? Because at the end of the day, it's going to have to be a bipartisan thing at the end of the day. And so that's why these other American overseas organizations need to come together under one umbrella. And
here we go.
And last point, there is another problem, and I'm not going to name the organizations, but there are two organizations, in my opinion, and from what I hear, are very linked to one political party versus the other. They're very linked to the Democrat side of things and not even willing to take a look at the proposal. And that is a problem. It's quite incestuous. And that is a disservice to the overall population who's adversely affected by this.
John?
Well, here we have for this. Well, I'm going to be brutally honest, okay? Max, that's the most foolish thing I've ever seen in my life. Okay?
This comment, and I just say that this comment is that.
So therefore, because somebody thinks it can't happen, therefore, you don't make the case for what should happen. I mean, that is indescribably absurd. But go ahead.
Because the whole point, and I think this comment is like, well, wait a second. I don't understand this because it's too much of a sea change. Why? Why? Wait. Why is it too much of a sea change? No one in the world, no one in the world does what we do. So why is it? So what? Essentially, what this is like, you know what? I understand Democrats are a major political party in this country, but really, they're kind of powerless here, really, if you think about it. Because what can they do, right? What can they do? So, they don't have the power to change the law. So we should just take whatever little scraps they're willing to give us. Ooh, beg for it. Because really, what power would our elected officials actually have over this? That's just basically...
Where the power is going to come into play is to have all these Americans overseas organizations under the same umbrella, supporting severing citizenship from tax residency. And it is absolutely, I'm sorry, it is absolutely absurd and idiotic to not even ask for residency-based taxation.
Right.
You're defeating yourself from the get-go. It is absolutely mind-boggling.
Surrendering before. It's just a pre-surrender. You didn't even, unbelievable. Yeah. So
why don't we stop the podcast now? This is impossible, right? The rest of the world has it, but it's impossible. Why don't we just
It's impossible, right? So, hey, let's just, continue, right?
If you want to achieve a goal, you define what the goal is. And if the goal is getting legislative change, then that has to be the issue. Obviously. The only way I know of to not get this kind of change is to not demand it. That is unbelievable.
Well, and this is kind of what I'm thinking here, a little off the cuff, perhaps. But the problem is maybe consider that actually our representatives can't change the tax code, that it's outside the power of the political process. Because that comment kind of indicates, well, you know what? This is taxes we're talking about. Who can really change that? No one can, right? No one really has the power. That's really what the comment sort of infers. It infers that, and maybe it's a reality that no one can change the tax code.
So that means that positive changes can't be made, but negative changes to the tax
they
code
always can be, right?
So, for example, the Jobs Act where there's the transition tax and GILTI. Okay.
Oh yeah, that was a change.
All
That
right.
was a change.
That's a negative change. And then that certainly that came from the Republican side of things. Okay.
Right.
But now the paradigm has shifted where you have Democrats who actually support GILTI. So it absolutely does not make sense.
Right,
So
and that
you
was
could,
right, and
so,
that was kind of
so
bizarre to listen to the Democrat Solicitor General argue passionately for the Republican idea of the transition tax. But then I would say that's also a simplistic view of it because President Trump had no idea what he was signing. The transition tax came from Kevin McCarthy, who is about as deep state as they get, and it was magically showed up. So we actually don't even know who came up with it. It's basically the Uniparty. It came from the Uniparty, and the Uniparty's arguing for it. Is really what's that.
But I'm sorry I'm being repetitive here, but why is it okay for negative change?
Yeah, right.
But not to ask for positive change.
That's beautiful, Keith. Well stated.
You know what? If that is in fact sort of the prevailing wisdom, then it's very, very clear that by not identifying the problem and demanding the change required to solve the problem, that really what you're doing is reinforcing and supporting citizenship tax.
Exactly. Yep.
So, I think that's accurate. Okay. That the failure to identify what the issue is and demand the change, is actually reinforcing the existing order.
All right. I do want to, by the way, I want to thank Max's for that comment.
But this leads us right into this next set of slides, right? And this is why this is, a great example of why Americans abroad in their groups are the biggest obstacle to achieving. Well, because they don't want to ask for it. We just learned that, right?
Right. That's too much.
But why is that? Well, because they have differing interests and financial profiles. There are some who benefit from the current rules. Some are happy with carve-outs but leave the problem intact. Mostly this is based on where their financial center of gravity is. The people who are the individuals most negatively affected are long-term Americans abroad. But continue with the slides because I've gotten a little more granular with this, I think. All right. So here are these groups and people. First group, they believe in U.S. citizenship taxation. My country, sea, sweet land of liberty. I mean, so you got them. You got people who equate residence and citizenship. Then you have, this is an interesting one. This whole idea of the opportunity to vote should mean an obligation to pay taxes. That's interesting. But mostly, I think they just believe that taxation is what it means to be an American.
I would think actually the bottom one is really it. We've been programmed. We have been programmed. There has been so much government programming into believing that into income taxes is inevitable and the price we pay for a civilized society. And then I would say the reason why society is uncivilized is because of the income tax. There we go.
Group two. There aren't that many of those. Now, second group these are people who you're seeing more and more of this because of the cost of living in the United States. They have a lifetime work in the U.S. They have Social Security, maybe a pension. They move outside the United States to retire. Now, this is an interesting issue, right? They generally either have no interest in this or will oppose it. And the reason is that their perception is that all of a sudden they'll be taxed as non-resident aliens. Okay, on their retirement income, which they're not happy about. It'd be higher taxes. The AARP, as I've said before, would absolutely oppose change. Next group.
Yeah, and oftentimes, I would just say a lot of these people who retire overseas, oftentimes teachers and people, government employees, a lot of times these people are Democrats, and they vote for the very policies. They vote for the very policies that make retiring in the U.S. unaffordable. So now that they've torched America, now they go overseas and now they won't vote for the changes. They're like, okay, well, I have my little carve out here. Hey, look, we destroyed, my policies destroyed the United States. Now I'm going to run hightail, go to a cheaper place where to live. And look, it doesn't really affect me that much because all my retirement's based in the US. What's the problem? So they'll continue they'll continue to really vote for the things that harm everybody. But they got their little escape, they got their escape route, and they're doing okay. They're enjoying their low cost of living and their retirement in their state after they burned everybody else. That's very nice of them. All right, group 3.
Now, this is interesting. The digital nomad group. So, we go from the retirees to the people starting out in life. Now, their situation is kind of interesting because there's an industry out there that has taught them, basically that work done outside the United States is sourced out, the income sourced outside the United States, and they're able to leverage the foreign earned income exclusion. Okay, at least a lot of them, et cetera, et cetera. In other words, digital nomads generally are able to actually exploit U.S. citizenship taxation, right, because of the foreign earned income exclusion. But anyway, these are younger people. What they don't have is a financial center of gravity outside the United States. Generally, they're also not, trying to manage the problem of families and retirement planning and stuff like that. But that's a group that you're not going to get support from. Next. Oh, it's not a problem for me, so it's not a problem. I mean, what more is there to say, right?
Again, that's basically my entire frustration with everyone's indifference to the tax code. Now one thing is it's so complicated, it's so powerful, it's so difficult to understand that people just raise up their hands and give up. I mean, that's really what we have. The reason why the tax code is so complicated is because it's a psyop to wear you down. And it's so complicated, so you can't figure out what to do. And you're like, okay, you just raise your hands up like, oh God, all right, whatever it is, end this nightmare for me. I can't figure it out. And that is really the financial terrorism that's going on, that people actually can't figure out their rights. They can't figure it out, so they surrender. I'm like, all right, well, here's my, I'll pay you more than you go. Just don't kill me, don't kill me. I give up. And that's what happens a lot. Yeah, what's up, Keith?
Yeah, and I just wanted to, and I don't know if this is going to be brought up or not, but let's take a look at another group that's adversely affected by this. So let's do the stereotypical view here. So you have the husband, okay, who is not American and married to an American wife, okay, and they're living overseas, and the husband works, the American wife does not work. And for them to be able to survive properly, everything is in the husband's name as a non-American, and the American wife has nothing in her name, okay? And as a result of that, it creates more of a complication should, heaven forbid, something happen to that American husband. And it puts that American wife in
not American husband, right? Yeah.
Right. Yeah, non-American husband puts the American wife in an extremely vulnerable situation. Now, it could be an American husband and a non-American wife. I'm just using the stereotypical example. And that's a serious problem that doesn't get much discussion. And that is a problem there.
Yeah, and I think what I would say is that, okay, I'm not going to, that's because the solution to the problem is to put everything in the name of the non-U.S. person.
Spouse. Yeah.
Right, but that's kind of a deal with the devil too, because at some point, there's really likely going to be a change, right? And now you're kind of, your solution didn't work anymore, did it? Your temporary solution that solution will stop working at some point.
And it's a terrible solution, to put your spouse in. It's awful.
Right. Yeah. All right. Next slide there, John. We got.
But let's not ask for RBT. Let's not ask.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Let's not do that.
So, group 5 are the people who see the solution to this problem of expanding the foreign earned income exclusion so that for Americans abroad, non-U.S. source income is not taxable. No. Okay. They remain subject to the U.S. tax code. The U.S. tax code then just says, well, you're not taxable on a certain kind of income. That does not solve the problem. It leaves them subject to U.S. tax jurisdiction. The other thing I would point out is that all the other provisions, the forms, the penalties, etc., under every existing proposal in that way, continue on. Anyway, next. And then we move to seat-in Republicans overseas who are concerned with the general principle and recognize that the only solution is severing citizenship from tax residency, and
Yeah.
that's what you go for, because that's the solution. You don't ignore it and say, well, we know that's the solution, but
let's not go for this. We know the solution, but let's not ask for it because
no, we're not going to ask for that. I mean, honestly, it's hard to even make up a reason for that, right? But anyway, next, what do we have here? Oh, okay, that's a great idea. Look at this.
yeah, let's do that.
Citizenship from tax residency is the only problem for all people, all time. Yeah, that would do it. Awesome.
Oh my God, amazing.
I mean, it's unbelievable. I mean, we were at the point in this discussion. I mean, think of this: that for U.S. citizens to be treated on a level with how the citizens of the rest of the world are treated by their government is somehow a radical minority idea. The vast majority of American citizens and their groups want this abuse. They're unwilling to ask for fair treatment. They just won't. I mean, is this what it means to be an American? I mean, I will go back to this. The obstacle to change is less the U.S. government, and it's the individuals and the groups. I mean, the U.S. government wouldn't even know what the solution is the way these groups behave.
Yeah. It's amazing. And
I'm sorry. I'm just going to say this. So
Keith.
it's like African Americans, let's not ask for civil rights because we're not going to get it. Let's not ask for it. We should just accept our lot in life, and let's just keep Jim Crow in place, and let's not ask for civil rights.
We'll ask for, we'll ask. Right. We'll just ask for a separate water cooler a little closer to us. Right. I understand. You got to do it. But so just make it a little nicer, a little, which is just really never the solution. And I think, we're, because, we're coming to the conclusion of thank you for this. I think this is a great place, to leave off because we're getting some comments. We're getting some great comments. People want to take some, people want to take some action on this. And let me just get to, how do we, we want to take some action, right? How do we bring people together to ask for it?
Well, I think, listen, I'll give you an answer right there. The first thing is to get agreement on what the issue is, severing citizenship from tax residency. You push your group. What are you really asking for here? Is this simply improving the prison of citizenship taxation? Or is this getting rid of the problem altogether? And I want to say this as well, okay? Human nature being what it is, people tend to think in terms of the short run. And they tend to think, in terms of, what benefits them immediately. But I think that, people need to think more in terms of the long run, okay, and how this affects, their families going forward and that sort of thing. There's only, and also as long as, I think part of the problem here, as long as the various groups or the thought leaders in this area are allowed to define the issues, you're going to have a problem. Because unless the issue is defined as getting rid of the cancerous tumor that citizenship taxation is, there can necessarily be no real progress.
There can never be. There never can be, right?
And that's what, that's unfortunately. Now, I will say also, I mean, I've been at this, as I said, for a lot of years. And at the beginning, okay, things were a lot worse in the sense that there was hardly any recognition of the problem. Interestingly now, there's a reasonable number of good stuff written on this. There's a reasonable recognition of the problem. There are reasonably defined groups, that I think could take a leadership role in really solving the problem. So we have better conditions today. And also, 2025 is major tax reform in the United States, which is another reason why this becomes the objective now, because this is going to happen in the context of major tax reform. So, I think you hold your representatives to account. I think we ought to have a separate podcast on how to perhaps effectively, if you're
well, that's exactly, and our commenter before was just stirring the pot a little bit here, because he's asked exactly. I really appreciate this. Max is he's on our side. He was baiting us a little bit, so he's asking how to best support. And you know what I'm thinking of here, as we we have JFK here, what can we do for our country? And I think I have a pretty good idea what we can do. Let me just get this up here, because I think this is the most critical thing. John and I have been talking about this for years, and it's really something that was probably my biggest red pill of all time. And let me just get this up here. Where is it there? And why is it not showing it? Hang on one second there. And let me just share this here and get that. It doesn't want to share.
I have some thoughts on this. Maybe we save them for another podcast, or we start the discussion.
Yeah, here it is. This is what I want to talk about.
Wow.
If you are looking to take the action, and you really want to understand everything, if you want to understand the world on a level no one understands except the very few people who have the luck, the fortitude to stumble across this book and open it up. Good and for evil, the impacts of taxes on the course of civilization. This will open your eyes so much to
It's
the
open
nature.
mind.
You're right, Keith. Thank you, Keith. Right, exactly. You have to read this book. Read this book. Talk about it. Now you are going to be empowered with the truth. Everything you say that comes out of your mouth will be wisdom. The people around you will say, "Oh, I didn't know that." And if you read the chapter on the United States of America, oh my God, you will read that chapter and realize how much we have been lied to from day one. We have been lied to, abused every which way. The history is written by the victors, and the victors are the ones who impose this income tax on us. We don't want it. It's not good. This is where you need to go. Everybody needs to go here and read this book. Go to Amazon, read it. This is your mandatory reading if you want to make the world a better place. Let me see if I have a link for this somewhere, but you can go to Amazon.
I got it on Amazon. It's not a problem at all.
So go right. You can still get it on Amazon. Get this book, read it. That is the best thing I could ask you to
Anthony,
do. Yeah, go ahead, John.
Could you put into the, I want to put a link in, linktree.com.
Okay.
/ just a minute. I did a series of podcasts on that book.
Okay. Oh, right. Yeah, right.
Hang on. Let me see if I can get the link with this guy I know in Dubai.
Gentlemen, I am going to have to go because I have a call that I need to take. But this has been a very good podcast.
Thank you so much. Yeah, and I want to thank you, Keith. Thanks for joining us.
All right. Anthony, I'm going to send this over.
Okay, I'm signing off.
Anthony, I'm going to send this over to you by email, and if you wouldn't mind putting this up. Okay, it's a series of podcasts. It's about the book, and a series of podcasts that I did on the book a while ago. So just give me a second.
All right, great. While John's getting that to me, this is a great comment. Barshel, thank you so much for joining us today. And this is really the point. And I think this book will help you understand there is no bigger Democrat than a Republican and vice versa. This book will help you show the truth about this country is not great. And the very first bill signed into law by this country was the excise tax of 1791, which was one of the greatest betrayal. It was such a betrayal by George Washington against the very people who made his victory possible. It was an immediate betrayal. And that is what this country is. It's this, this is what it is. Why the government thinks they own us? Because of empire, the American empire. There was no greater person who believed in the American empire than Abraham Lincoln. Abraham Lincoln is who invented citizenship-based taxation. Yeah. There's a lot of uncomfortable facts about the truth of this country and how bad it is and how taxation was the first weapon used. John was the one who indicated me properly. No. We didn't fight. We didn't fight to escape brutal taxation. The founders, and George Washington, especially Alexander Hamilton. Oh, no. They were jealous. They were jealous and envious of that British power to tax because they were doing it all wrong. They wanted to really tax their enemies and then benefit their buddies. That's called the American system. All right, let me get that link up for you, John, where I have it. Let's see here. You just sent that to me. Let me just get that so people can know where to find your series that you did on this.
There's more stuff on it. I mean, that's a very, very important book. I would point out that it was written in 1994, though. Things weren't anywhere near as bad as they are now.
Yeah.
The title of the book, The Impact of Tax on the Course of Civilization. I mean, I suspect that if Mr. Adams were alive and writing an update to this, he might say taxes are civilization, right? I mean, we've said time and time again, all you have to do to understand a country is look at its tax system.
That's all. To understand America, it is an exceptional tax system for an exceptionally, really, really awful.
Well, maybe it should be seen as just part of empire, right?
It's part of the empire, right? When you're looking to build an empire, hey, look, we got to take some. I didn't get your email over yet, John. Let me just see if I can stop this here. If I can find, didn't come over yet. Let me just take a look to see if we have it on here. We have slow internet today. Here we go.
You got it?
Here it is. Okay. Yep. Hang on. I'll get this link. Okay. So you guys can follow this link. Hang on. I'll just copy and paste. Incredible multitasking I do, by the way. I often congratulate myself. Waiting it to load. Yeah, I can't do anything about the slow internet. Here we go. All right. Let me copy this. Oh, so it's at the Charles Adams. Oh, the Charles Adams Society. Oh, yes.
I created it, the Charles Adams.
That's our Charles Adams, really one of the greatest writers of all time. Powerful. And I would say, to me, second to the Bible, this is the Bible. It is.
Because remember that the national religion of the United States, there may be a Church of England, and the Church of the United States is taxation, the Internal Revenue Code, right? That's what it is.
There it is, right on. So here we go. Perfect. Here we have the link. We have the link right here. You can go there to learn a little bit more about Charles Adams, and he will blow your mind. And I know we have a lot of people on it who've already bought it, read it. And we've converted. And I would say he's really, and it's a wonderful, wonderful book because it really starts with the history. Some of they'll hold history. And one of the things I think people miss out on is when you look at the U.S. tax system in context of all onerous tax regimes throughout the history, the U.S. still stands out well above everybody else. The U.S. is really the worst of all time, the absolute hands down worst tax regime of all time. And Charles Adams really lays out his case. And that is what we're dealing with. And if you don't know that, if you're walking around thinking, oh yeah, taxes stink and what can we do about them? Whatever. Okay. It's just policy. We're going to kind of have to think about it. Your solution is going to be something else, but with the understanding, when you have the knowledge, the power, and the understanding that the U.S. tax regime is by far the worst thing this planet has ever seen, to call it draconian is an insult to Dracos. To call it Byzantine is an insult to the Byzantine Empire. There is truly nothing as superlatively awful as a U.S. tax regime. And the problem is it's so complicated, people can't get there. But luckily, Charles Adams has really laid out the case, really done so much history to explain exactly what we're dealing with. And when we know what we're dealing with, we can solve it. So that's what I'd really say to everybody on this. What if you're looking to do? Take a look at Charles Adams, even go here for John. So again, I want to thank, we had so many new viewers today. Thank you all for tuning in. We're growing and growing and growing. I really appreciate it. Thanks in part really to our fantastic guest, the great John Richardson. John, and by the way, if you are thinking of renouncing from this wonderful, wonderful system, imagine someone would want to leave this, John. Could you imagine that?
Well, all roads lead to renunciation.
Indeed. So if you are thinking about renouncing, you're looking for someone to really help you out through this tight spot, look at all the issues properly, make sure you get the best advice, reach out to John Richardson at citizenship-solutions@protonmail.com. Likewise, Keith Redmond did have to step off today, and tomorrow he told me before he's talking to 3 individuals who reached out to him. Keith is not an attorney. He's not in the U.S. tax industry. He makes he has nothing in it for him. He just will give you the advice because the solutions for your situation really may differ. And I hate to say it, talking to a tax professional like myself might not be the best way to start because I am bound by law to tell you certain things. Now, what you tell me is protected by the attorney-client privilege, but you still may want to reach out to Keith just to get his perspective. He can fill you on what other people around the world are doing and are doing in your country for the most part. He's talked to everybody, nearly in every country. You could reach out to him at US_overseas_advocate@outlook.com. And then also for myself, I'm Anthony Parent. I am co-founder of IRS Medic with my dad. And now I am a partner at Thaveau and Partners, but you can still reach me at IRS Medic. And also there's my Twitter handle at IRS_medic on Twitter. Pretty active there. You can reach me there. And if you are kind of made up your mind, you do want to get into compliance already, you could reach out to us here. Even if you just need tax prep, you can reach out here at irsmedic.com/offshore, and we'd love to take you in and help you out with your situation. So with that, I want to thank everyone for joining us today, and again, giving you advice to be sure you subscribe, turn on those notifications. This week we're really busy. A lot of things going on. So we're going to be going on Friday. We're going to be talking Friday about the Republicans overseas perspective, and I believe it's our great friend Solomon Yu who's behind that. I met Solomon years ago for his efforts to repeal FATCA. Now he's even going further with a proposal to remove this awful slavery known as citizenship-based taxation. With that, this is Anthony Parent for Keith Redmond, John Richardson. I want to thank you everyone for watching and commenting today.